Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm very pleased to welcome here Ms. Hillevi Engström. She is a Swedish Minister for International Development and Cooperation. Sweden has been a staunch supporter of Ukraine's democratic changes here, and Sweden continues being one of the ardent supporters of the changes in Ukraine. I'm very pleased to hear about the decision of the Swedish government to allocate funding for reforms in Ukraine, which are much needed, and we are very pleased to see that Sweden and all other European countries are united for Ukraine. So without much further ado, I would like to pass the floor to Ms. Hillevi Engström. Будь ласка, хто не розуміє англійську, тобто візьміть там наушнички, переклад буде синхронно вам забезпечений. Дякую. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and I'm very pleased to be here. This is my first time in Ukraine and in Kiev, and I must say it's a beautiful city. So I'm very pleased, and the hospitality that I've been reached with. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Swedish government, let me express my sincere condolences to the Ukrainian people for all the lives lost so recently. I walked through Maidan twice today, and I was really shocked and felt very bad about the situation, especially all those young people that have lost their lives and all the photographs. And for me and for the Ukrainian people, it's of course very important that those lost lives hasn't done it without something that is about to change. I was also shocked and struck by the gravity and sadness, and not at least by all the flowers and candles, and I got the opportunity to also light a candle at Maidan. Still, it is almost impossible for me to imagine what you have all been through. Our thoughts are with you, and in this difficult time with all the people and all the families. But I have also been struck with another thing, something much more positive and promising. Something that tells me that this crucial time could also be a new beginning for Ukraine, and in a way, perhaps also a new opportunity to even deepening the Swedish and Ukrainian relations. I met today with representatives of the new Ukrainian government as well as with the civil society of the Ukraine. Together we talked about how countries like Sweden can help Ukraine, both on a short-term, immediate basis and on a more long-term basis, to develop into the kind of democratic and prosperous country that you want and have fought so hard for. Swedish cooperation with Ukraine goes long back in time. Equally important, Sweden's support to Ukraine is long-term and committed. In Ukraine, we now see a new momentum for change. Therefore, I am proud to be here to announce that the Swedish government has adopted a new strategy for Swedish development assistance for the Eastern Europe for the period of 2014 until 2020. Naturally, there is a substantial focus on Ukraine with an estimated support of at least 175 million euro for the period. Based on progress here, it is room to increase this amount of money. We are here today near the place that now everyone calls Euromaidan, named after the strong wish of the Ukrainian people to belong to Europe. To Sweden, there is no doubt, Ukraine has a clear place in Europe, and that is why EU integration is the main focus of our new strategy. However, the road to EU integration requires executive and strong decisions. Reform, sometimes rather painful, will be needed to create a more competitive society and economy, to strengthen democracy and to develop a society with a greater respect for human rights, where the state is governed by the rule of law. Through the new strategy, the government of Sweden makes a long-term commitment to continue to provide substantial support to Ukraine. Our support will focus on 3 key result areas. 2 areas have already been in focus since 2009. First, strengthening democracy and a greater respect for human rights and a more fully developed state under the rule of law. Second, a better environment, reduced climate impact and enhanced resilience to environmental impact and climate change. But the new strategy also includes cooperation in one new important area, namely enhanced economic integration with the EU and development of a market economy. When it comes to the first area, strengthening democracy and greater respect for human rights and a more fully developed state under the rule of law, the aim is that together we could achieve concrete results such as reduction in gender-based violence, hate crimes, and human trafficking. And we are supporting 12 NGOs. They would have core support from the Swedish government, and I met with some of them today for a lunch discussion. We would also like to see our cooperation resulting in that women and men have, to a greater extent, the same power to shape society and their own lives. Sweden has, as you probably know, for long time been a driving force in promoting gender equality. And right now I'm very proud to say that in the Swedish government we are more women than men, which is for the first time, something that you could look into. And we will continue to do so. Women's participation in decision-making processes is essential to building a sustainable and true democracy. I was amazed to hear that events at Maidan showed many brave young women taking the lead in building a new country alongside with men. And that's the way how you build a country, together. Regarding the area of a better environment and reduced climate impact and enhanced resilience to environmental impact and climate change, Sweden would like to continue to focus on more sustainable public services in areas such as water and waste management, energy efficiency and renewable energy for the benefit of the whole society. The area of enhanced economic integration with the EU and development of market economy is a new focus area. As a result of this cooperation, we would, for example, like to see that small and medium-sized enterprises make up a greater share of the economy. Support to small and medium-sized enterprises is an important part of efforts to promote a favorable business climate, strengthening competitiveness, as well as to increase employment, particularly in rural areas and among young people. Last but not least, I would like to stress that all efforts must of course be based on Ukrainians' own demands and needs, wherever possible be coordinated with other donors. We would like to walk beside and behind you, but you are responsible and should take the lead, of course. Sweden also welcomes the agreement between Ukraine and the IMF last week. The Swedish government has also declared itself prepared to examine the conditions for a bilateral loan to Ukraine as a complement to the one from the IMF. Sweden remains one of the strongest advocates of continued EU enlargement. Ukraine belongs to Europe. Therefore, Sweden and EU must continue to do its utmost to support Ukraine, both politically and financially. This is a desirable development, both for the Ukraine and for the EU. Thank you very much, and I will also ask the ambassador here to help me out if there is any specific questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Please raise a question if you have one, and introduce yourself. If there are no questions, I'm going to ask a question myself as a moderator. And I have mentioned to you that I'm myself an alumnus of the Swedish Institute Management Program, which was funded by the Swedish Institute and technically by your government and Swedish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And I believe that this is actually invested into the education of the Ukrainians could be a very good contribution towards bringing change here. I'm also aware the Swedish government is sponsoring some of the master's level studies in Sweden, etc. However, my question is, do you actually plan to expand? Because I really do believe that Ukraine has 45 million people, and if you could definitely expand investment into the education of the Ukrainians in Sweden, that would be beneficial to the changes here.
Thank you for the question. Education is key, of course, but also to realize the high level of education that you already got here in Ukraine and how to get the best use of it. And that's something perhaps we could talk more about. And right now I could not really answer that question, but I mean we're looking into every issue that is possible to help out for the Ukrainian people and for the path towards the European Union. And I think cooperation between universities, both in Europe, in Sweden and in Ukraine, could be very useful to have different kinds of exchange programs and things like that, because we also have lessons to learn from you. So it could be, both sides could benefit, and I think that could be something good.
Right. Also, my next question is about government procurement, because Scandinavian countries, and Sweden in particular, has one of the highest levels of transparency, and this is something which Ukraine lacks big time. As you know, we're at the bottom of the Transparency International list, and our government procurement is notorious. Which is before you, we just had speakers who reported on outrageous corruption in the Ministry of Health and how government procurement is done there. My question is the following, which is part of the technical assistance you now have explained to us. Do you have actually fighting corruption as one of those and reaching electronic government, procurement? Because your experience is extremely valuable to us, and we really believe this is where Sweden could really make an input.
Procurement is essential, and it's also we have a long-term experience, so I would be glad if you could help out with our experiences. And it's also a big challenge because you have to work with this all the time, and we still have problems with procurements, and we also have difficulties in our own society, especially in the building construction branches, for example. And we need more of transparency, and I think that we could cooperate on those issues because they are key to development, to anti-corruption. So I really agree on that.
Do we have any questions? Because if not, I will finish with a third question. In Ukraine, we say we have Holy Trinity, and this is a question that's related more to business, to the Swedish business primarily. Sweden has strong ties with Russia, and there is enormous trade between the two countries. And apparently now in the view of the sanctions which are pending in Russia and which are already partially imposed, what's the reaction of your business? You have large corporations such as IKEA, Ericsson, Volvo, etc., who are heavily dependent on Russia. They sell lots of good there. What was the reaction of business within Sweden, and how do you actually mitigate this reaction, and do you really intend to impose further sanctions on Russia?
I think I would ask the ambassador to help me out with that one. Yes, please.
Thank you.
Andreas from Beckera.
Thank you, Minister. Well, first of all, I'd like to say that anyone who's following the tweets of our minister, I think, has a pretty clear idea where we stand on the Russian annexation of Crimea, which we believe is a fundamental breach against international law. It's an aggression against an independent state, and should be condemned, and has been very much condemned by our government and also by the European Union. We also stand very much behind the decision by the European Union to impose sanctions on Russia. We believe that it's important that President Putin realizes that he has to pay a price for breaching international law in such a flagrant way. In terms of further sanctions, this is something that is being discussed in Brussels. The Commission is looking into possible further steps in terms of punitive measures, but it will very much depend also on, of course, further actions by Russia. In terms of reactions from the Swedish business society, well, so far these sanctions hasn't really been expanded towards full-scale economic sanctions. So I don't really believe that the Swedish businesses have been hurt so far. Thank you.
Oh, we got Jakub, key post.
Jakub Paruszyński, Keypost, thanks. So I think one of the key issues that we saw over the past couple of months, and indeed one of the reasons for the existence of this Ukraine Crisis Media Center, which is doing an excellent job, by the way, thank you, Vasil, is we've seen that the media played a key role during the Euromaidan protests. And since then, we have seen that the famous line that Ukraine is not Russia is largely due to the fact that Ukraine had a competitive media landscape. I don't say healthy, I say competitive. And I think that's something that's very important. What we see here is that in Ukraine, we had this competitive authoritarianism during multiple centers of power, but none of them really democratic. And this bringing me to the question, is the Swedish International Development Agency planning any movements in that direction, in supporting transformations of the media environment, the media sector, of whatever form, whether it's direct, whether it's exchange for journalists, any plans in that direction? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I think you have a very good analysis. I really think that media is really crucial and key, and that all the world has followed what happened in Ukraine is due to the relatively, competitive media. And I have followed it on the internet, and otherwise, who really have known anything? But so far, what we are doing, our cooperation with NGOs on media and journalism and criticism and all those kinds of issues. And I met with some of them today, and Telekritika, for example. And I think exchange is a very good way of learning, as I said on the previous question as well. So let's have a good cooperation, and I think that you can talk also with the staff members from the Swedish embassy. They are very interested and knew a lot about those issues. Perhaps we can help out in another way.
Thank you, Jakub. Thank you, Madam Minister and Your Excellency, that you found time in your busy schedule to join us today. We really appreciate it, and we look forward to seeing more senior officials from Sweden and Ukraine. We need to feel the backing, and apparently your foreign minister has been a frequent guest. We are also waiting for your prime minister.
Yes. He's here more often than he is at the Minister of Foreign Affairs in Stockholm. But thank you, and we will walk with you in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you.